cousin Marcus looked me directly in the eye, raised his glass of expensive single malt scotch, and announced to 30 family members that he was evicting me from the $740,000 family business I built with my own hands. Riding this on a fresh account because my sister knows my main. Everything else stays. Background on me. Sloan, age 32, female commercial interior designer, oldest grandchild. Apparently that mattered to the wrong people. If you are enjoying this family betrayal story, let's get right back into how my cousin thought he could steal a lifetime of my hard work. My grandfather, Frank, started Timberline Custom Cabinetry 40 years ago in a modest concrete block warehouse located in an industrial zone just outside Chicago. He was a master craftsman who could look at a raw slab of walnut and instantly see a high-end kitchen island. I inherited his exact obsession with wood grain, blueprints, and the smell of fresh sawdust. From the time I was 14, I spent my summers sweeping his shop floor, learning how to operate the giant German-engineered computerized routers and mastering the complex world of client relations. Marcus, on the other hand, was my Uncle Don's only son, and he hated the shop. He refused to step foot inside the building because he claimed the dust triggered his allergies and messed up his designer clothes. Marcus was the ultimate golden child of our extended family. Uncle Don and Aunt Joan spent decades telling everyone that Marcus was destined for corporate greatness, while I was just the tomboy granddaughter playing with power tools. My grandfather loved the business, but by the time I turned 24, his health was declining. His hands shook too much for precision carpentry, and the digital side of running a modern business completely overwhelmed him. I had just finished my degree in design and business administration, so I stepped in full time. Over the next 8 years, I completely revolutionized Timberline. I brought in high-end interior designers, secured partnerships with luxury homebuilders in affluent suburbs, and automated our ordering system. I routinely worked 70-hour weeks, personally supervising installations for clients who paid upwards of $80,000 for a single kitchen. Marcus was busy drifting through 3 different colleges, crashing a brand new car his parents bought him, and spending his weekends at expensive clubs downtown. Yet, at every family Easter brunch and Christmas dinner, the entire conversation revolved around Marcus and his grand corporate ambitions. My Uncle Don would sit at the table, cut into a prime rib, and brag that Marcus was networking with major players. Meanwhile, my grandfather would quietly look at me from across the table and squeeze my hand, acknowledging who was actually keeping the family name respected in the local business community. The cracks in the foundation began to show when our grandfather suffered a sudden, massive stroke. He passed away 3 days later. The entire family was devastated, but the grief shifted to pure greed within 48 hours of the funeral. We all gathered at my Aunt Joan's house for the reading of the will. I knew my grandfather had a standard estate plan from 2018 that split his personal savings equally among his children and left the $740,000 custom cabinetry business entirely to me since I was the only one running it. But when the family attorney opened the file, he looked highly uncomfortable. He cleared his throat and read an entirely new document. It was a secret corporate codicil, a legal amendment that changes a specific part of a will, signed just 6 weeks before grandfather passed away. According to this new document, Marcus was named the sole owner and chief executive officer of Timberline Custom Cabinetry. I was left with absolutely nothing but a small, secondary workshop space in the back corner of the building, which the document stated I could use rent-free for up to 2 years. I sat in that living room utterly speechless. I looked at Marcus, who was grinning from ear to ear while wearing a brand new Brooks Brothers suit. My Uncle Don patted him on the back like he had just won an Olympic medal. I asked the attorney how this was even possible, considering grandfather was barely lucid 6 weeks ago. Marcus immediately stood up, puffed out his chest, and said that grandfather finally realized the business needed a real male leader to handle the big-picture corporate strategy. He claimed grandfather signed it willingly during a private afternoon visit at the assisted living facility. The rest of the family instantly chimed in, telling me I should be grateful I even got to keep using the back workshop. Aunt Joan muttered loudly enough for everyone to hear that a woman shouldn't be running a heavy manufacturing shop anyway, and that Marcus would take Timberline to the next level. I looked around the room and realized nobody cared about the truth or the absolute betrayal of my 8 years of grueling labor. They only cared that the golden child was now sitting on top of a highly profitable $740,000 asset. I refused to cause a massive scene right there, but the very next morning, Marcus showed up at the shop acting like a king, inspecting his peasants. He drove up in a leased BMW M4 that cost at least $90,000, paid for completely with a fresh corporate draw from the company bank account. He walked through the main showroom, critiquing everything, and immediately told our master carpenter that things were going to change around here. Within his first month, Marcus fired our receptionist of 12 years because she refused to print out his personal travel itineraries. He replaced her with a 22-year-old Instagram model who spent her days ordering expensive organic salads from Trader Joe's on the company credit card. Marcus also decided that he was too important to work in the standard front office, so he spent $34,000 of company cash renovating the main office into a luxury suite with leather couches, a custom wet bar, and a display case for his golf clubs. While Marcus was busy bleeding the company cash reserves dry, I had to make a choice. I could spend 2 years and $50,000 fighting the suspicious codicil in probate court, or I could use my brain to outmaneuver him legally. I knew trying to prove undue influence in court was a massive uphill battle that could take years, during which Marcus would completely destroy the business anyway. So, I took a step back and looked at the bigger picture. I quietly launched my own independent high-end design firm, calling it Sloan Vane Designs. I worked out of the small 800-square-foot back workshop that the will had granted me rent-free access to, because I had spent nearly a decade building deep, trusting relationships with the top luxury homebuilders and architects in Chicago. They didn't care about the Timberline name. They cared about me. When they called the main shop and found out Marcus was running things, they instantly noticed the drop in quality and customer service. Marcus began outsourcing our high-end cabinet boxes to cheap, mass-production factories in Indiana to save money, while still trying to charge premium prices. The builders hated it. Within 6 months, my independent consulting firm was absolutely booming. I was pulling in over $22,000 a month just designing high-end spaces and sourcing custom metalwork and premium finishes. I didn't need Timberline's machinery anymore because I partnered with an incredible, state-of-the-art fabrication facility across state lines that handled my manufacturing with absolute precision. I kept my head down, let everyone believe I was just struggling along in my little back workshop, and kept my financial success completely silent. Meanwhile, Marcus was sinking fast. He didn't understand how to manage cash flow. He didn't realize that commercial lumber prices fluctuated wildly, and he had absolutely no idea how to bid on large commercial contracts. He lost a massive $180,000 contract with a major suburban condo development because he forgot to submit the bonding paperwork on time. To cover his tracks and maintain his lavish lifestyle, Marcus took out a $120,000 commercial line of credit against the business assets, thinking a few high-end residential jobs would cover it. Then came the absolute turning point of my entire life. I was reviewing the original corporate incorporation papers and real estate documents from 40 years ago, which my grandfather had given me in a box of old personal effects years before he died. I noticed something that made my heart stop. My grandfather was a brilliant craftsman, but he was also incredibly old school about asset protection. When he started Timberline in 1986, He didn't buy the warehouse land under the corporate entity. Instead, he bought the physical land and the building under a completely separate private real estate partnership that he owned personally. The custom cabinetry business, the actual corporation Marcus now owned, was simply a tenant that paid rent to the real estate partnership. When grandfather died, the suspicious codicil Marcus forged only transferred ownership of the corporation. The cabinetry business itself, the actual physical land and the warehouse building, fell into the general residue of the estate, which was handled by a completely separate, standard probate clause stating that any unlisted real estate assets were to be liquidated or sold to pay off outstanding estate taxes and personal debts. I immediately called a high-powered commercial real estate attorney who had no ties to my family. He pulled the county recorder deeds and confirmed my exact suspicion. Marcus owned a cabinet business, but he did not own a single square inch of the dirt it sat on, nor did he own the actual warehouse building. Even better, the estate executor, who happened to be a neutral, incredibly tired bank trust officer, was currently looking for a buyer for the warehouse property to settle my grandfather's remaining $160,000 personal medical debts and estate taxes. The bank didn't want to deal with managing a commercial property, so they were planning to quietly list it on the commercial market. I told my attorney to make an immediate, cash offer on the land and building. Thanks to my incredibly successful independent design firm, plus a smart savings portfolio I had been building for a decade, I had the capital. I quietly purchased the commercial property for $385,000 through a completely anonymous, newly registered limited liability company called SV Holding Group. The entire transaction took place through corporate attorneys, completely shielded from my family's sight. The moment the deed was transferred into my anonymous LLC's name, I discovered that Marcus hadn't paid the warehouse rent to the estate in over 5 months. He assumed that because he owned the business, the building was his to use for free. He completely ignored multiple automated notices sent by the bank trust officer because he thought they were just standard junk mail. My attorney looked over the master commercial lease agreement from 1998, which was still legally binding. The lease explicitly stated that if the tenant failed to pay rent for more than 90 days, the landlord had the absolute right to terminate the lease immediately, seize any corporate property remaining on the premises to cover back rent, or drastically adjust the monthly rent to current market rates with a 30-day notice. I told my lawyer to sit tight and do absolutely nothing yet. I wanted Marcus to dig his own financial grave just a little bit deeper. Marcus continued his downward spiral, completely oblivious to the fact that his entire operation was sitting on a legal landmine. He began taking weekly golf trips to Arizona, charging the flights, the $5,000 a week resort stays, and expensive steak dinners directly to the Timberline business account. He even bought his girlfriend a $12,000 vintage Rolex using a company check, falsely labeling it as an equipment asset purchase on the corporate ledger. Our grandfather's old, loyal clients were completely abandoning the shop. Our master carpenter, a man who had been with grandfather for 25 years, finally walked out after Marcus yelled at him in front of a client for refusing to use cheap, warped plywood on a premium walnut library project. The master carpenter came straight to me, and I hired him on the spot for my independent firm, paying him a 20% raise. Marcus didn't even care. He just hired a couple of cheap, inexperienced day laborers to fill the gap, completely destroying whatever reputation Timberline had left. The grand finale arrived on Father's Day. My Uncle Don and Aunt Joan hosted a massive family cookout at their suburban home to celebrate Father's Day, but everyone knew the real purpose was to celebrate Marcus's 1-year anniversary as the CEO of Timberline. The entire extended family was there. Aunts, uncles, second cousins, and longtime family friends. Marcus was dressed in a tailored linen shirt, holding a glass of high-end bourbon, and loud-mouthing his success to anyone who would listen. He was bragging about how he was planning to expand the showroom and turn Timberline into a multi-million-dollar franchise. I arrived late, dressed in casual jeans and a simple t-shirt, after spending the morning finalizing an installation for a massive $60,000 residential project. The moment I walked into the backyard, the atmosphere shifted. My Aunt Joan gave me a condescending smile and asked if I was doing okay over in my little corner workshop, or if I needed Marcus to throw some scrap wood my way. Marcus saw me and his eyes lit up with malicious glee. He called for everyone's attention, tapping his expensive glass with a silver spoon. He announced that he had a very special presentation to make. He walked over to his designer leather briefcase, pulled out a formal-looking legal document, and marched directly over to me in the center of the backyard. He handed me the paper with a dramatic flourish. It was a formal corporate notice stating that Timberline Custom Cabinetry was reclaiming the 800-square-foot back workshop for corporate inventory storage. The document stated that my rent-free access was being terminated immediately due to corporate restructuring, and I had exactly 14 days to completely clear out my tools and vacate the premises. Marcus smiled, took a slow sip of his bourbon, and said that business was business. He told me that a small-time designer like me shouldn't be taking up valuable manufacturing space that a real corporation needed for expansion. My Uncle Don chuckled loudly from the grill, and several of my aunts nodded in agreement, whispering about how Marcus was making the tough executive decisions that a real boss has to make. They all looked at me, waiting for me to cry, storm off, or beg Marcus for an extension. I looked down at the document, then looked up at Marcus. I couldn't help it. I smiled. It wasn't a fake smile, it was a genuine, deeply satisfied grin that completely caught him off guard. I asked him if he was absolutely sure he wanted to play this game. Marcus laughed, puffed out his chest, and told me that the will was ironclad. He owned the company, and there was absolutely nothing my broke, jealous self could do about it. He told me to pack my little drills and get out of his building. I reached into my canvas tote bag and pulled out a thick, leather-bound folder containing the certified property deeds, the master commercial lease agreements, and a formal notarized legal demand packet prepared by my commercial real estate attorney. I handed it directly to Marcus. I told him to turn to page 3. He looked confused but opened the folder anyway. As his eyes scanned the text, the smug, arrogant smile completely vanished from his face. His skin turned an explicit, pale shade of green. My Uncle Don walked over, asking what the hell was going on. I addressed the entire backyard, making sure my voice carried clearly over the sound of the patio music. I told them that while Marcus was busy spending company cash on leased luxury cars, fine dining, and country club memberships, he completely forgot to check who actually owned the physical real estate underneath his feet. I explained that Timberline Custom Cabinetry did not own the warehouse, the showroom, or the land. My grandfather owned it personally, and his estate sold it to settle his debts. I then revealed that my anonymous LLC SV Holding Group was the sole legal owner of the entire commercial property. Marcus started stammering, his hands shaking so violently he almost dropped his glass of bourbon. He yelled that this was a lie, that the building belonged to the business. I told him to look at the signature on the deed transfer. I explained to the entire stunned family that Marcus was currently 5 months behind on his commercial rent, totaling exactly $35,000 in unpaid base lease fees. I also pointed out that according to the master lease agreement, because he defaulted on the payments, I had the absolute legal right as the landlord to adjust the rent to current market value. I handed him the updated commercial lease addendum, which raised his monthly rent from the historic rate of $7,000 a month to a modern market rate of $18,500 a month, effective in 30 days. But I wasn't even done yet. I turned to the next page in the packet and read the formal legal demand. Because he had violated the terms of the lease by failing to maintain the property and falling into severe financial arrears, My LLC was officially demanding the immediate payment of the $35,000 back rent, plus a $10,000 late penalty fee within 7 business days if he failed to produce the total sum of $45,000 by the following Friday at 5:00 p.m. My attorney would file an immediate commercial eviction lawsuit against Timberline Custom Cabinetry. Furthermore, under the explicit terms of the 1998 lease, if the tenant was evicted for non-payment, the landlord had a legal lien over all commercial machinery inside the building to satisfy the debt. That meant I would legally seize the $150,000 computerized routers, the dust collection systems, and every single piece of heavy equipment he needed to run the business. The entire backyard went dead silent. The only sound was the sizzling of the burgers on the grill, which my Uncle Don had completely forgotten about. Aunt Joan looked like she was about to faint into her potato salad. Marcus kept flipping through the pages, his eyes wide with absolute panic as he realized every single word was backed up by certified county records and ironclad commercial law. He looked at me and corporate mumbled that we were family and that I couldn't do this to him. He claimed this would completely destroy Timberline. I looked him dead